I always like starting with this because I still think it's hilarious. If you can't read it, it says, so this is where our movement came along and finally got the Bible right. And if you see, it's at the very end there. The other person says, Jesus is so lucky to have us. I feel that this pretty much explains the Protestant Reformation in so many ways. You're going to go through through basically a lot of history. I invite you, if you have questions, to write them down and ask me at the end, because I don't want to take up too much time and we will never get through this. I promise you there will be time for it. But anyway, so we'll start at 33 AD. 33 AD, Christ is crucified and resurrected. Pretty standard stuff. 33 AD in a day, the church starts fighting for itself. There are problems, we start arguing amongst ourselves. Ananias and Sapphira from the book of Acts go and try to keep the church, but what happens to them? They're dead. They are struck dead by the Holy Spirit. Up to a great start. At this point, it's still gaining steam, about 300, I don't have it up there. Constantine legalizes Christianity in the Roman Empire. He does this not because he is a Christian, his mother is one, but he does it for the tax. He does it because he wants to make a tax base. He's like, hey, there's a bunch of money on the table, we are not taking it. So he does this. From that point on, the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, is the be-all and end-all of everything. In 1054, there's the Great Schism. This is when the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church break from each other. They've broken from each other since 1054. They are trying to reconcile. They never will. The Protestants, well, the Catholic Church has said that we can reconcile back to them. We never will. So this is when it happens with them. Now we get to the Protestant Reformation. I'm skipping over a whole bunch of history here, but I'm giving you the highlights of what's kind of important. As many of you know, in 1517, Martin Luther nails his 95 Theses to the door at All Saints Church in Wittenberg, Germany. This is not to start his own denomination, his own faith. He is complaining about the injustices that are going on. And many of you know this. I know this is a brief history lesson, but this is important because this starts the Protestant Reformation. Eventually, he does break from the Catholic Church. He's excommunicated and goes, I don't care. And he really does. And a quick side note, when I was in Rome about 12 years ago, they had a special exhibit at one of the museums there on heresies or heretics. They had Luther's bull. The bull is the papal parchment that basically kicked him out. And I'm like, this thing probably changed the world more than anything else I've seen in my life. It was really cool to see it. It was probably about 40.
Wow. Just that one.
It was ridiculous. I'm like, is this all
Document?
Yes, it was Luther's bull. It was that long. And I think it's because of all the charges. Anyway,
That's a bunch of bull.
starting in about 1534, Henry VIII of England wanted a divorce with Catherine of Aragon. The Pope said no, and King Henry VIII said, see ya. That's where we get
Anglicans.
the Anglicans. The Church of England is born, which you are Episcopal, if you're Episcopalian, that's your church. So that's where we are. In 1703, John Wesley is born on June 17th. You also have to remember that these dates are debated because they changed from a Gregorian calendar to the other one, the Julian calendar. So the dates are different, but in 1703, John Wesley is born, and then his brother is born 4 years later on December 18th, and this is Charles Wesley. Charles Wesley is probably the most prolific hymn writer, psalmist.
They're the best.
Huh?
They're the best hymns.
Thank you. You say whenever Easter, we know it. But he is one of the most prolific English writers of song history, written over thousands.
Oh, good read.
Yeah, it's a lot, and he's a better theologian than John. But anyway, we'll move on. So they are 2 of 19 siblings from Samuel and Susanna Wesley.
That is one tough woman.
Yeah,
Boy.
and 5 of them died, so they're still 19. Susanna Wesley raised them all herself, self-taught them. She taught them rhetoric, she taught them theology, she taught them how to learn. She is really a pillar of female empowerment in Christendom. She was a very strong faith, and she brought it up in all of her kids. So the two red dot or the two red lines, the one on the far right is Charles, the other one is John. Those are the only two that really pay a lot of attention into the Methodist Church. Samuel does, he's over on the other end. They all pay in some way, but those two are the main two in the history of the church. So what happens is in 1709, his father Samuel is teaching, or is the pastor at Epworth. There was a fire that happens at the parsonage. They believe that it was arson from somebody who was upset with what Samuel Wesley said in the sermon. So just remember that on Sunday, people can set your house on fire. John Wesley was caught in that fire. As you can read, he was basically dead when they found him.
Oh, yeah.
The family did not expect him to live, and they actually even wrote an epitaph for him. He was about, well, technically, 6 years old at this point, 5. So he survives, which is a true miracle, but they believe that this is an arsonist. There's a lot of problems, and it shaped a lot of the family's faith in God. Beyond that, in 1720, John Wesley enters Christ College. 1724, Charles Wesley enters Christ College. As you know, Christ College is one of the main Anglican churches. An undergrad starting a holiness club, which was started by Charles Wesley. He decided this was a group of people that wanted to come together and share their faith and learn and grow. So basically, their job was basically this: fasting, prayer, studying the Greek New Testament, visiting prisoners, paying off debt, preaching, teaching, holy living. That is what they were told. And they were called enthusiasts, and they were called methodical. This is where the word Methodist comes from. We are very methodical in our structure. You are going through the process. You know this very well. I went through it about 4 years ago. I know this very well. And so that's where the term comes from. It's supposed to be an insult, and I said, no, we are. We're very thoughtful and we're very methodical. So that name kind of stuck in the Methodist movement again. In 1735, Father Samuel dies in April, and John and Charles Wesley leave on October 21st of 1735 to come to the American colonies for a mission. The idea for them was to come to change all of the natives, to bring them all to Christ, and make sure that they all knew Jesus Christ and they were saved. On their way over, as you can read, there was a terrible storm that the English that were on the ship were terrified. In fact, they even asked John to baptize a baby in case that they did not survive the voyage. During the midst of the storm, there were German Moravians. Don't quite know exactly who they are. They're a sect. Just can't remember what they are. Moravia.
But they were very evangelical minded, mission minded. They would even put themselves as indentured servants to get transportation to foreign countries to spread the word.
You know, again, I've read this.
Yeah.
But so he saw that. And during the storm on the ship, he realized that they were untroubled by the storm. They had absolute faith in God, and John Wesley looked at that and said, I will not pass. This is on his trip over to the Americas. So he comes and he spends some time here. He arrives in Savannah, Georgia, February 6, 1736. John and Charles Wesley both come at the same time. This is basically the only place they were in the colonies at this time. And they come and they try and preach, they try to establish things. And you know what happens in Georgia. I'm going to test you on this one.
Well, yes.
What
he
happens?
gets- Well, I think he falls in love with a lady, and
You're damn right he does.
Charles has the audacity to introduce that young lady to someone else.
Oh,
They get married. They
Yep.
show up wanting communion, and John says, "No, I will not serve you communion."
This is exactly what happens. And I'm not going to reiterate it, but her name was Sophie Hopke. And he is basically at this point, he says he's refusing communion because she took the proposal of another man to marry. He broke off the original engagement. He was being petty. So he does this. So the warrant is written out the day after this happens. And he literally is put on trial for this. And as you can see, August 27, 1737. The trial ends in a mistrial. They didn't have the evidence that they needed to convict him. He did this. Let's be very honest here. The reason I bring this up is I want to show you that there is not great moments in Methodist history. We'll get into this a little bit more as we go through it. But Sophie Hockey is a.
Can we say Henry VIII?
It's been great, but there's also really bad moments. But anyway, so he's put on trial. Right after this, literally December 2nd of 1737, the Wesley brothers depart Georgia and at home. One of the things that John Wesley writes is he said, I went to convert the natives, but who will convert? He felt that it was an absolute waste of time. He felt defeated. He felt that he was going to give up his calling. And 1738, he and Charles Wesley both arrived back. It's a long trip home for them. They are tired. And then, do you know what happens in 1738?
We go visit the Moravian guy.
Aldersgate.
Oh, his
So Aldersgate,
heart is
if you
gently
ever
warm.
hear a Methodist say their hearts were strangely warm, this was John Wesley's, basically his conversion into the understanding of the gospel, understanding of who he was and what he was called to do. Aldersgate was a holiness club. It was one of those things. And I'm going to read aloud what John Wesley wrote because he says it way better than I. So this is what he says about the Aldersgate experience. In the evening, I went very unwillingly to a society in Aldersgate Street, where one was reading Martin Luther's preface to the Epistles to the Romans. God works in the heart, faith in Christ. I felt my heart strangely warm. I felt it, and I did trust in Christ, Christ alone, for salvation, and an assurance that was given me that he had taken away my sin, even me, saved from the law of sin. This was a profound moment. This is one of those things that you will hear from your Methodist friends every year on May 24th. We call it Aldersgate Day. This is truly an important day for us because this is really what spearheaded John Wesley into forming the United Methodist Church as we are now.
I read that in the American Christian history book I have somewhere. So maybe the Methodist movement.
We're not all bad. There's a few of us there. We'll get to that too. Anyway, so this is an important moment. John Wesley is a very good organizer. He's very good at building structure. This is what he excelled at. So from 1734 to 1744, John Wesley was out in the streets. He was out everywhere. He was in pubs. He was preaching every place that he could. And of course, the Church of England did not like this. They believed that the word of God should remain in the church. And John Wesley was going out to the people. John Wesley also believed that lay people could speak. The Church of England struggled with that because they said, if you don't have theology, you shouldn't be preaching. But John felt that we have God in our lives and we have guidance. Anybody can be a lay speaker, you can be a lay preacher, you can go through the process and become a full ordained elder. But this is what he does. So he is out there, but he says, hold on, this isn't a full-formed denomination now. I still want you to go to the Church of England for the sacrament of communion and baptism. He says this because he is an ordained priest in the Anglican Church. So is Charles Wesley. They're both pastors in that church, and they're struggling. Eventually, in 1744, the Wesleys hold a conference of pastors. This is technically the first annual conference that we as United Methodists claim to have. And this is where the Methodist Episcopal Church is born. So in 1744, our church basically has come together. At this point, we've all but broken away from the Church of England. We are no longer part of them. We have become a different sect, a smaller sect, and we basically grown. We hit at the right time because, so anyway, in 1769, that's a 1 in front of that 7. Richard Boardman and Joseph Pillmore arrived in the American colonies. These are the first 2 official pastors sent to the colonies. So 1769 is when they come. 1776 is when the American Revolution starts. Pardon me?
You're right in the middle of it.
They just were there right before. So this is St. George's Church. This is called the Cathedral Church of Methodism, American Methodism. We have to be correct about this. This is in Philadelphia. It's still there. It's still an active United Methodist Church. But this is where they go. They purchase this land, and this is the oldest Methodist church in the United States. So in 1769, this was built a little bit later, but that's what happened. So 1770, Mary Evelyn Evans Thorne is appointed as the class leader. This is the first time in the United Methodist history that a woman is put in any type of leadership role in the Methodist Church. I want you to remember 1770 because you will see when the first ordained female clergy happens. That's much later. Anyway, and so that happens. 1771, Francis Asbury volunteers to travel to the Americas. By the end of his first year, he's preached and visited 25 different settlements. That is a lot of moving, a lot of writing. Granted, this is on the East Coast, it's not in Wyoming. We can get places a lot quicker than we can across the state of Wyoming over there. But he was very much out there with people. This is where circuit rider started to get that idea. The circuit rider motif came much later, basically in the antebellum era of history. Yeah, after that. Anyway, so that's what happens then. 1775. The War of American Independence begins. It actually begins in 1775. All but two of the Methodist pastors in the country leave because we came from the Church of England. They see us as Tories, as loyalists to the crown. They see us as spies. They see United Methodist or the Methodists. We are not the United Methodists. So they are afraid. So all but two leave. The two that remain are Francis Asbury and James Dempster. They are the two that remain through the entire process of the American Civil War. Yes.
Is Francis male or female?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's I don't know if Wesley did not like this guy, but he said, Thomas Coke, you are going to America. You are going to be the first superintendent over the American colonies. And I can only imagine what he just went. Because this is a war going on, but he comes over. So he is over here, and the war continues. 1783, the American Revolution ends with the Treaty of Paris II. 1784 is when the Christmas conference happens in Baltimore. It happens from December 4th to January 2nd, 1784 to 1785. This is when formally organized the Methodist Episcopal Church in America. This is when we become the Methodist Episcopal Church. This is who we are. We are no longer the English Methodist Church. We are our own entity. Thomas Coke and Francis Asbury becomes co-superintendents. Coke is recommended by the clergy. They are the ones who say, we want him. And John Wesley says, I want Thomas Coke, or I want Francis Asbury to be with as well. As you can imagine, they did not get along too well. They were not best friends. They really struggled. But this is literally the starting date, the first time that we call ourselves the Methodist Church. For the other were the Methodist Holy Living Circles, but this is the time we actually call ourselves a founded denomination.
So are you saying that
Well,
the first actual Methodist denomination wasn't in Europe? It was Europe? The United States?
no. This is the Methodist Episcopal Church. The Methodist English Church is already established. So we break away from them. We are still in good relations with them. We're friends with them. We're sister churches. Our theologies are pretty much close to each other, but we are the United Methodist Church. Did you have a question?
What attracted John Wesley to
Because he wanted to go out to the people. He wanted outreach and he wanted lay people to speak in the Church of England. So he said, okay, I'm going to start doing it anyway. And he kept getting in trouble and finally disappointed. And he walks away from the church. At that point, the Protestant Reformation is in full swing. You have the Anabaptists and the Baptists over in Central Europe. You have Calvin sprouting up, and you just have a whole bunch of people who just start spreading out again. First cartoons. Pardon me? So, I mean, there are a bunch of them. So it wasn't that hard for him to say, I'm done. The church had lost basically the absolute control it had once the Reformation started. He just decided this is what he felt was going. So this is when we found that church. In 1787, this man, Richard Allen, is a freed slave who was ordained at the Third Conference in 1782 for the Christmas Convention. And this is the first time he is appointed to a church. He's appointed to St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, Philadelphia, the church I just showed you a few minutes ago. This is the first Black man who was ordained as clergy and who has served a church full time in the Methodist Episcopal Church.
Was the church African-American or white?
You ready for this?
Bring it.
Well, first we got to go through a couple more.
Okay, okay.
So in 1788, as you see, Charles Wesley dies on March 29th. He dies at the age of 80. In 1791, John Wesley dies on March 2nd. He's 87. This is basically what somebody said his death looked like. We're pretty much sure it didn't look like this. But that is the image of the death of John Wesley. So anyway, you were asking about that church. That's a great question. In 1792, Richard Allen walks out with the Black congregation of St. George Church. It was a Methodist church, but as you can see, there were also white congregants there, and the Black congregants outnumbered the white, and the white said, we want the church. And what were they going to do? They literally had no choice. So they walk out of that church in 1792, and it wasn't until 2009 that Black worshipers were back in that church. From this point, this is the defining point for the AME, or the African Methodist Church. They are still around. They are our sister church as well. I have a lot of friends who are in that church, but they are mostly where a lot of the Black Methodists have gone at the time because they went to that church, and because we treated them well as white people. I should say they did. I wasn't there. So anyway, so that's what happens in 1792. They basically, the white people take the church and say it's ours. The Black people say we're done. So they start their own denominations. They have their own bishops. They have their own. Basically, we share a lot of structure with them. Bishops, we have superintendents. So in 1800, the Church of the United Brethren in Christ is formed. This comes into play much later, but I want to just let you know that they start in the 1800s, and they eventually help us along how going. In 1739, Frances Elizabeth Willard is born on September 28th. Any of you know who she is? Oh, you're gonna love this. So, you don't know who Frances Elizabeth Willard is? Where'd you go to seminary?
Gambler.
So Frances Elizabeth Willard is born. Her name will come back up in just minutes. And she is a driving force between one of the major policies of the century. She is one of the people that began prohibition.
That began what?
Prohibition.
Prohibition.
Well,
Okay.
not just for. Anyway, so 1844, slavery becomes a dividing issue, not only in the Methodist Church, but in the entire United States of America. You know, we have a minor skirmish for years over this. We basically split into two denominations at that point, the Methodist Episcopal Church and the Methodist Episcopal Church South. You can guess which one, which way. The Northern said no, the Southern said yes to sleep. In 1864, one of the most horrendous acts done by a Methodist pastor happened down actually in Sand Creek, Colorado. On November 19th, a pastor, Colonel John Chivington, decided that he would lead a raiding party of 700 armed soldiers into a tent to a peaceful Native American village for 70 to 163 Native Americans were killed. Most of them, 2/3 were women and children. Pardon me? They were. And he didn't care if he slaughtered them. We came back up several years, probably in, I think in the 90s, Every year we are asked, or the district superintendents in the Methodist Church by tradition are asked if we are perfect in our duties, and the response is yes, they are by the grace of God. In 1990, they said, everybody except this Jim, because he literally went in and killed them for no good. Share this again because it's important to understand that we have problems. We really do, and I don't think it is okay for us to say that this was all right because it's. Clergy do bad things. We know this. We've heard the news. We've seen our colleagues do them. But I really feel that this is one of those moments that needs to be honored and respected in our tradition of Methodist, because the Methodist pastor is the one who wrote this.
Schools and forced the children.
Pardon me?
The best things in school with force of children and children to.
Yeah.
Our.
And I mean, the government did that too, so yeah. And so, we'll go back to Frances Elizabeth Willard. Frances Elizabeth Willard, in 1874, is named the second president of the Women's Christian Conference. The WTCU is one of the absolute driving forces to, and their main purpose was to ban alcohol in its entirety in the United States, everywhere, nothing, no exceptions. They thought that they wanted to create a sober and pure world. They thought that this would solve everything. Along the way, they started picking up the right of suffrage. They thought, we can put this hand in hand. And they preached from the evils of alcohol. They talked about reform, and they literally did this. They pushed it. They really went hard. Frances Elizabeth Willard lived in Evanston, Illinois. She lived right next to Northwestern University, which is where I went, a Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. This is her area, very conservative Christians, and they decided that their right was to change policy for everybody. Also, the quick side note is there's a distillery in Chicago called the FEW, the Frances Elizabeth Willard Distillery.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's
I don't
funny.
think that the whiskey's great, but it's still really funny that they did.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Pardon me? Also. Oh, yeah. I was like, are they going to court? A lot of people are, but anyway, so this is what happens. Now in 1879, this is the first test case for ordaining women in the Methodist Episcopal Church. 109 years after the first woman was given leadership authority in the Methodist Church. It took 10 years after that for the first woman to be ordained in the Methodist Church, Ellen Oswald. The first one. 102 years after. That's a long time. It's really a long time for them to have waited, but we did. Eventually, they were given ordination rights, but they did not have full clergy rights. They could not vote. They were just.
They could preach.
They could, but they couldn't do anything at any conference. If you're a licensed pastor, you can't do anything at conference. That's a different story. So, in 1898, Frances Elizabeth Willard dies, February 8th of the age of 58. They say that it was from influenza, which was pretty rampant at that time, but her legacy came around. I bring this up because in 1900, 2 years after she died, full laity rights for women were happening. Well, the Methodist Episcopal. She fought her entire life for this to happen. And it happened in 2 years, not just for the church, but in general for women to get the vote. Obviously, the vote for women came later, but she was basically the founder and spearhead of this movement. She missed the laity rights for women in this church. In 1820, we decided it was a great idea to try the noble experiment. We created the Volstead Act, which was named after the Judiciary Committee Chairman, Andrew Volstead. This was the law that prohibited the sale and consumption of alcohol in states. This was helped not only by the Women's Christian Temperance Union, but the Methodist Church as well. If you ever go to a Methodist church, we do not serve wine. We serve grape juice. And specifically, You know what grape juice it has to be?
Welch's,
It has to be Welch's, you're right.
because she
Uh,
was
the
a
Welch's-
Methodist.
They were Methodists. They wanted a substitute for wine, so they are the ones who make grape juice. So we have non-alcoholic,
Non-fermented.
yes, non-fermented grape juice. Or if you leave it in the fridge too long. Anyway.
Mhm.
That didn't happen once or twice.
Or the backseat of the car.
Yeah, so anyway, so this is why we in the Methodist Church still only serve grape juice in our communion. It is an honor to respect for our history. As I always like to say, this is my joke, and some people don't appreciate it. I don't know a sober Methodist pastor. I mean, there are some, don't get me wrong, we all pretty much drink and serve. But this is part of our history, and it's important to know that this is what we have for tradition. In 1939, the Methodist Episcopal Church, the Methodist Episcopal Church South, Methodist Protestant Church, merged just to become the Methodist Church. In 1946, the merger of the Evangelical Church and the Church of the United Brethren in Christ will become the Evangelical United Brethren in Christ Church. That's a word.
Mhm.
So these are very important because if we come up to this, in 1956, this is when women are given full rights to voting in the Methodist Church. 100 years. 60 years since they were allowed to be ordained. We finally could vote, we finally had full. 450. Well, so we're just way better than that.
Southern Baptists are still working on it.
No, they're not working.
Well, oh, yeah. Good point, good point. Yep.
But in 1967, the first woman district superintendent, Margaret Englandson, appointed in the US. So in the United Methodist system, we have a bishop who sits at the top. Below her are her underlings of the district superintendents. They oversee the districts. We are divided up to the annual conference, and that's divided into district. But one DS, as we call them, supervising the church. You're in Wyoming, correct? I'm in Wyoming. We have the same district superintendent. We all serve with their will because they appoint, or they recommend to the bishop. The bishop appoints us to our appointments. And we only serve 1 year. No, we can renew them year after year. I've been here. This is my 3rd year going here. I've been yours for 2 now.
Start in a second.
We've got 1 more after this and then we'll go.
Next summer, hopefully, unless I miss out.
Not
planning on it.
I'm taking notes, so.
I was afraid of that.
We also get both to say yes.
Looking at Methodist history, chances are.
Yeah, I mean, don't slaughter people. So anyway, in 1968, Union of the Evangelicals, Brethren Church and the Methodist Church merged together. This is when we become the United Methodist Church. People think that we just threw united in there to some Brethren Church. So we are the United Methodist Church on April 23rd, 1968.
At SMU. Southern
That's right,
Methodist
it was at
University.
SMU, I forgot that. Watch the video.
Her alma
Were you there?
mater.
I mean, I was
I'm
fine.
assuming you were like not a woman.
Oh, I was fine. I know, right?
So anyway, so yes, so this happens in Texas at Southern Methodist University, ironically enough, and this is where we get the cross flame. The flame honors the Brethren Church. The cross is basically the United Methodist Church. Not just. So anyway, that's what we decided. That's the logo that we have stayed with for almost, oh gosh, 60 some odd years right now. I'm terrible with math. That's why. So in 1971, we had, it was decided that the women needed to do something, so the United Methodist Women were formed at that point. They are the oldest and longest lasting. Help me out here.
Christian Women's
Service. Service organization in the Methodist Church. This is when they formed. They are now called the United Methodist Women in Faith. Don't know why they changed it, but they did. Anyway, in 1972, the first General Conference of the United Methodist Church. General conference happens every 4 years. This is what policy for the entire United Methodist Church is changed and modified. I will grab my book of discipline in a second because it's really fun reading. I mean, you got your one of those. Exactly, and they're just absolutely written and stuff. Yeah, we'll talk about that. So the way that it works is each conference sends delegates. I think forget how many were allowed, but it's anyway, so they're voted on it.
Just under 1,000,
Huh?
wasn't it? I think it was just under 1,000,
No,
900.
no, like each conference, I think we only have 5 or 6.
Oh, no.
Oh, God, I don't want
Someone isn't observing in the class.
Right, and you probably went to St. Louis. The Methodist Church in St. Louis is actually but they move general conference. But every 4 years, this is where we change our book of discipline. This is where we ratify or remove things from our discipline. And it's a long legal process that I'm not fully aware of. You probably have a little more expertise than that. They asked me if I wanted to go, and my first response, and pardon my language, was, "Oh, hell no." Because it was absolutely atrociously boring. We've been to one.
Yes.
It was painful. If you are a Methodist nerd, people are going to these. I would not want to go.
Robert's
they are nominated
Rules of
people.
Order.
Pardon me?
Robert's Rules of Order carried out to the nth degree. Yeah.
Did you say we're methodical? Yeah. So anyway, so this is what happens. This is the first time we actually have it. And we are still doing this every 4 years. We didn't COVID because it's COVID. So now we are waiting until next year where we will have our next year conference, which will be 8 years from the previous classes. San Diego, I think. Does that sound right?
2016 was in Portland, Oregon? Or?
No, Seattle.
Oh, Seattle.
Seattle. And what started with so yeah, it'll be there. It moves by jurisdictions. There are basically 4 jurisdictions in the conference: the New England states, the southern states, central, and then the western jurisdiction. I think there's 5 actually. There's 2, but anyway. But they move to each jurisdiction at a time, so once every 20 years, it goes back to one jurisdiction. So this one will take place. We can talk more about general conference in a little while, because this is where the policy that we're going through, and it's exhausting. 1980 is the time that we actually appointed our first woman as bishop. Marjorie Matthews is a bishop at that point. It's 200 years after the founding of the Methodist Church. We had a woman finally. Our current bishop, our conference is Bishop Karen Oliveto. She is the first LGBT bishop who's been out. She and her wife served as bishop, which has caused a lot of issues and basically spread out the process for a lot of people to disaffiliate with the church. But
And where is she located?
she's in Denver.
Okay.
But she's over the Mountain Sky Conference, which is all of Colorado, all of Wyoming, all of Montana, all of Utah, one church in Wyoming. At that point, basically, it just filled this in because we just continue to grow, we struggle. We have not been a perfect church. We have failed to listen to God's word. Our mission statement is exactly that: to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. We're very Methodist thing to say. Do our best at it, and we fail a lot of times. There are a lot of problems. There's a lot of issues, and just because I still think this is one of the best Farsight conferences in the world, we're going to do it.
Oi. Jerks.
So anyway, yeah. Pardon me? Yeah, it's just a joke. So anyway, that's what I have for the history of the Methodist Church. I'm going to just let you guys take about. Yeah.
Cribbage.
Okay. So what I'll say is, why don't we go ahead and take 15 minutes and then.
Okay.
Talk about it. Actually, I put this up here for Lent a couple years ago, some people. We don't do this. Our church, or some churches do, we mail and take this happening. And that's why they. The Catholic, and the Lutheran church, they specifically do. Church of God. Pardon? Actually, I literally want to put that up because I need to put something.
Cory, what are some of the theological distinctives for Methodist?
We have a very broad theological spectrum. Yeah, so the Methodists believe, the best way to put it is we believe the Bible is inspired by God or written by man. We do not believe it's the inerrant word of God. She likes that. Because we believe that it also brings discussion and conversation, where if you say it's the inerrant word of God, you can't argue. That's it. This is what Paul said. It's we do not believe in dispensationalism or the rapture. It's not biblical. There are people that do, but most of them don't understand it. 17 something in Scotland. There was a young girl who had a dream about all the sinners being left on earth and everybody else was raptured into heaven. And she went and told the pastor, and he ran with her.
Was that one reference we just talked about something?
Caught up in the sky or something like that. Yeah.
It's not about the rapture.
Yeah.
Right, and it's a very unsound theological argument, because if we believe that this is God's creation, God created us, why would God take us away from him?
There's a Methodist scholar named Robert Hewitt.
Yep.
Who wrote a book called Equals Against the God.
I
It's a really good book.
need to see that one.
So. That makes a difference if you say something about. How you drop
No, we just became just the Methodist church, because the reason we broke in this in passion is because it's Civil War and that one, and then we came together and we said Methodist and this book was just say, we just said, hey, let's follow that. No, the Episcopal Church is the Church of England. We changed the name because we don't want people to call us the English. That's why we just celebrated on the 4th of July, but we are in England.
One of the oldest AME churches, well, the AME church in Miami is one of the oldest churches. Yes, I believe it's built before.
Remind me where you're serving.
So I have Grace in Grand Rapids and Cheyenne, and then Pine Bluffs,
How far is that?
40 miles.
40?
And then I help out with Wheatland. So we just appointed a CLM there.
Who's that?
Luann.
I should know because I'm the district committee. And we didn't-
Also, she'll be coming up to, she's moving on to be a licensed local pastor.
Yep, that, so the district committee and ordained ministry oversees all of those things. Or all the licensed lay speakers, they all come under the. Yeah, I don't know why I accepted that, but I did.
It's the extra pay.
Yeah, whatever words are in heaven is what I keep. Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that's a lot of our theological conversation and discussion. We do run the gamut in the Methodist Church. We don't have a single theological stance. And we do have churches that are very, very conservative. There are some that do believe that the Bible is inerrant. Issue with them being Methodist. But then again, we also have some on the other end who don't believe the Bible. other than a piece of fiction, which, even if it is,
I mean, historically, there's a lot of history in it that is.
I agree. I'm just, I agree. And, you know, there are things that we can't, you know, I always like to say historical records are sketchy at best. Like anytime somebody asks me something about Jesus, I'm like, I don't know.
Look it up together.
Yeah. Actually, that was the best thing they ever taught in seminary. You should learn this. First day in seminary, they taught me this. They sat everybody down and said the best phrase you could ever learn as a pastor. You know what it is?
I don't
I
know.
don't know. Because as soon as you start saying you know everything, it's just gonna be a train wreck. Yeah. And bears build nests in trees, and some days they're nests. Yeah, I mean, and I always tell people I will look it up in the back. We believe, I guess the one thing that you can say about the Methodist Church is we believe that the sacrament is open to all. Communion is a sacrament. We only have 2 in the Methodist Church. I don't know how many are in the Anglican Church.
I don't know.
So ours are just baptism, the communion, or the only sacraments we have.
You have more than that?
That would be the same as Baptist, Episcopal. I don't know what their theology is about that. Don't know. But the ordinance, the sacraments, the Catholics have like 7.
There's 7.
Yeah, but we don't have,
Yeah.
yeah, we do.
Do you? Okay.
I think it is a sacrament.
Burials. Yeah. Confirmation.
So you basically have this. The only other one I think that the Catholic Church is sacramental. That is a sacramental act. If you want
To do
You
what?
can't be married. You have sacramental act of being ordained clergy.
Oh, yeah, that's a sacrament for them. Yes.
Because you're either married or you're a priest or a nun.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I think those are the big things that when we serve communion, the table is open to all. As we say, we don't, I repeat it every time. We don't need to be a member of this church or any church to accept the elements. Huh? I don't, because that's a conversation between them. Membership is different. But I also believe that Christ said that the children come on to me and
Mhm.
you know, aim to serve and have faith like a child, like and then receive the sacrament. The other thing, probably pretty much like all of you, we believe in consubstantiation of the elements, not transubstantiation. Love the book. You know what you like. So every time, I'll just share this story because it's really funny. Every year in mid-spring, we have a crawfish boil here in July. And I mean a crawfish boil. We've ordered 70 tons of crawfish.
Oh, I need to come to that.
We do, and it's
Fun and it's good.
it's so much fun. So I volunteered because 2 of my members here sit on the board who are in charge of the crawfish boil. And I mean, this is like 30 to 40,000 people coming to the crawfish boil. It's the whole team. Pretty much, I should go rob people. So I volunteer, and I always go out there, and I'm the one who hands people beer. I don't take the money because I'm terrible at math, but I take the tickets and hand them beer. And I was wearing a shirt that says I'm a pastor, don't look so surprised. And there's really a point.
I need to know where you get your t-shirts.
Tell you. But I was standing there handing this out, and this one lady, she was rather involved. Yeah, oh, I'm a pastor too. And I love it when they say this, and I'm like, who you are. Yeah, yeah, I'm ordained. I said, oh, cool. I said, was it online? Yeah. I said, I didn't spend $130,000 to save it. Anyway. Substantiation of the elements or the transubstantiation of the elements. What does that mean? I'm like,
Yeah.
Consubstantiation means that something happens. It is no longer bread and wine or grape juice. There's something mystical about them. They are less sacrament, but they did not transform, as the Catholics believe, to the body and blood of Christ. Right, it's just a symbolic. But we in the Methodist Church believe in the
We
consecration,
believe in the presence of Christ is here.
which is basically consubstantiation. It's a blessed sacrament. You know, and that's, I used to be Presbyterian, so
Oh, okay.
I grew up Presbyterian before. I became Methodist. So, yeah, so that's probably the biggest theological things that we have.
Okay. Which historically speaking, is a big separation. It would be Baptist and fundamentalist have close communion, which nobody but your approved members of the church are.
Some Catholics do.
Catholics.
Well, but you can go to any Roman Catholic church and still get communion.
Oh,
If, well, exactly. You can go to any Roman Catholic
Yeah,
church and
or
get,
if you-
but you
any Baptist church?
that's close communion. You cannot go to any Baptist church.
You have to be part of our Baptist church.
Correct.
I had a priest friend, I had to do it, of course, it's a whole house.
I'll take your word for it, but they'll take your word for it. Yeah.
serve the church and
That's somebody.
And, but anyway, it was Thanksgiving and Presbyterians were invited to join the Catholic, but the Catholic priest. Bob Joe was in it. And so we were there together and he said, we're going to have. Everybody's been served. And so I got to take you out and take communion. Now, his purpose in doing this, he said, well, we'll tell the world. But at one time, the Catholics and the Presbyterians got mad at each other and families split. So he knew this and invited all his families back, the Catholics over here, the Catholics over here. And then I was pastor helping them out do that. And after the service, all these people were hugging, weeping. That was the best communion service I ever did. This was supposed to be about. Wow, we put together and give this a love and joy.
So basically, the way that it works in the Methodist Church is you can be a certified lay speaker. That just means you can stand up and speak in front of people. All you have to do is take a public speaking class. It's really easy. It's about 4 hours on a Saturday. You get a certified lay speaker license. The next thing after that is a certified lay minister, which is basically where a lot of us start as. We are basically either filling in pulpit supply. We were just there. We want to say, hey, we have a calling to do this. And at that point, a lot of people, that's when they go to seminary. We are required to have an undergrad and a master's degree in divinity. We are required to do 3 years of at least master's work. I think the current.
So your undergrad has to be in divinity as well?
Mine wasn't broadcasting.
Okay.
And what was yours?
Marketing.
So as long as you have a bachelor's degree, and you don't have to take any aptitude test, just apply to God. So after that, you become.
And what kind of process do you have to get in? Is it just the application to divinity school, or do you have to be approved by a bishop?
No, because the Methodist Church really doesn't fund the seminaries anymore. It's tuition based instead of the church based. It's basically applications. You can go with the blessings of the conference. But I went independently. I just said I'm going because my conference didn't care about me. That's a very long story. I don't need to get into.
Gotcha.
And then eventually when you're done with that, you can become a licensed local pastor. This is the first step in the process of ordination. In the clergy, a licensed local pastor is technically what you are. Actually, you're not. You're a probationary officer. Or you're on probation. So sorry about that. But a licensed local pastor, they can do all of the sacramental rites that an elder can, but they can only do it for their church. If you anything below that, if you have no right to do that. That's just the rules of the Methodist Church. You can get care of it. Yeah, and Vietnam was the reason for this. Because a lot of clergy decided, a lot of people said, hey, I'll be a Methodist clergy person. And the Vietnam War was going on, so they jumped into the Methodist church and they realized there was a lot of bad theology going around. So the process became a lot more complicated. Because when I was going through it, you're given a mentor. Who's your mentor?
I just got a new one.
Who's your new one?
It's Long Peaks, Jonathan. It's in Colorado. Just met him at annual conference. My
Okay.
last one was Jeremy
Scott?
Scott.
Ugh. No, this is,
Like passed away.
no, his wife passed away. That's why I was going there. It was very sad to go that. It was like the one of the first, but, I'll have to think about it, but anyway.
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah? He? Or John Jeremiah? Anyway, so we're given a mentoring process. And at that point, you go before your district committee of ordained ministry, which is what I sit on. Say, I want to become clergy. And we say, okay, we got some, there's always writing in almost every step of this process. You got over the worst one, which is the one you spent when you want to be a provisional elder. But you go to you say, I want to be voted on, so they send you to the Board of Ordained Ministry. The Board of Ordained Ministry is basically what we all sit under in authority as elders. We have the order of elders, but they sit and our rights are taken through the Board of Ordained. I call it the boom, they call it the BLM. I just like saying boom. That's just how it is. So at that point, and if I get anything wrong, it's been so long and it's been so convoluted. At that point, you start submitting paperwork, it's reviewed, and you become a certified candidate. That means basically you submitted all your stuff and they're like, okay, we like it. Certified candidate basically puts you into the position of probationary elder for 2 years or 3, unless you get.
Unless you.
So when I went back to my church and they said I'm a probationary elder, I told them I couldn't believe or drive. They said, what, you can't drink? I said, no, I'm on probation. He said, oh, I can kidding. So, yeah, well, yeah, I lived in northern Montana. But at that point, we have one final step at this point, which is what you are going to be doing. You will be submitting paperwork by the end of the year.
October 30th.
Okay, October 30th, mine is January 2.
I'm working on it right now.
This is the easiest one. Because of exegesis, this is eisegesis.
This is all.
This is
Tell me
all
about your practice. What
This
do
is
you actually?
reflective work, which is fantastic. Because when I submitted the paperwork to be a provisional elder, I think mine numbered 46 pages.
Yep.
Well, you know,
I had 62 footnotes.
Somebody has to be, they will
I think I
I had rewritten mine
Uh,
completely 3 different times.
I don't know, I didn't print it out, but it was double strings. Still, but still, that's a lot of writing. So one of the questions they ask us, and I'm sharing this because in the Methodist Church, we have an order of deacons, which is a non-ordained position. Our Bishop Weiss is a deaconess, not deacon, deaconess. They're home missionaries. These are the ones who go out the world and serve in the non-ordained way.
So
That's what I'm
Stacy's-
doing.
Are you a deaconess?
I'm not yet. I just have to do the online class and
So I have to tell you, I helped somebody do this. You know Molly?
Molly, what
Oh, what's her name? I'll think of it.
something.
is she an Eagle?
No, she lives in Montana. I helped her with the process, and one of the questions that they had was the exact same one. Yeah. It took me 14 pages to describe the phrase, how do you define Jesus as Lord? For the deaconess program, complete this in 2 sentences or less. You will find that one
Yeah,
last.
yeah,
Because I looked at this and I looked at her, I said, I would write 14 pages on this, good luck.
yeah.
But it's a different, I mean, it's a, you don't, it is, and it's not, and it's a very important ministry, don't get me wrong. But it's not a master's with divinity ordination, which is, it's got a call, I think it's a wonderful. Do you?
I do.
Good for you. The gateway drug with a PhD.
Keep working on it.
Gary
to
is
Garrett.
offering PhD, which was she said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They asked me. That was, I'm like, I'm done.
That's me.
I actually just pulled into the registrar's office because they said, you see, you have a lot of pass fails, so we can take a 30-year curriculum in seminary pass fail. You've noticed, right? 30-year curriculum in seminary can pass fail. And I took most of my last year of pass fail because I was taking 16, 18 credit hours per semester. Means you either pass the class or you fail.
No ABCD girl.
Yeah, you don't get a,
Did you do the minimal work to pass it, or did you fail? Which makes it a lot easier to just like, I can just skip this. So I was pulled into the registrar's office and he goes, you know, we're concerned about you taking all these pass fails. And I'm like, wow. He goes, well, if you want to get into the PhD program, that's good. No. He was a friend of mine, so I could do that. But good for you. And it has its place. It's just not my call. What do you want to do with it?
Seeing spirituality. I'm studying how focusing on non-dual spirituality can bring some peace in the world as opposed to all the violence that we're seeing kind of as an incident.
Thank you. You still there?
I don't know that.
So anyway, so at this point, he is where he is now. Basically, it's 2 years. You go back between those 2 years for one meeting at the Board of Ordained Ministry. They tell you things to work on. They say, hey, this is what we see in this year. This is what we want to work on. Then you fill in the final paperwork, which is probably half of what the first paperwork is. Reflective work, saying how did your ministry go? How did your projects go? Did you see God in this? Where did you struggle? Those questions. So it's all internal instead of citations. I think that's the one I had 2 footnotes in. But my first one I had probably.
So being from Texas, most of my answers that I've started have begun with, you're not gonna believe this shit.
Welcome to the Mountain Sky Conference. So at that point, they will read it and you will go with them, they'll talk with you about it. And they will have a vote as a board, and then you'll meet again with the reading team, as I recollect. They will tell you either you are being deferred for another year, or something they saw, this is a problem, you don't think you're ready yet, or they recommend you for ordination to the third session. Every year at annual conference, elders and deacons can vote on their orders. So when he comes up next year, I have the right to vote on him, say yes or no. I will tell you this, there's always a no vote. It's just this tradition of the Rocky Mountain Conference. They don't know why. They're jerks about this. Yellowstone never did this. But so at that point, once you get the vote, at that moment you are an elder in both nations. Ordination comes later when the bishop touches you on the forehead. That's your ordination. I was ordained I was an elder in full connection in 2020, and I became ordained in August or October of 2021. Physical, 18 months after I became an elder in full connection.
And Presbyterian Church, you have to come before the presbytery to be approved to be ordained. And first you meet, before that meeting, you meet with a committee, and they ask you questions, and they tell clarify if you're okay. Well, the committee I met with had 3 of my professors from the seminary. And one of the questions was, what was St. Anselm's doctrine of baptism or something? So, I read it, but I said, I don't remember. And they said, what question do you have? I said, I've always wondered, well, what is like to go to heaven? And start going out there. So the next 20 minutes, those 2 guys sat, argued about what happened.
Oh, wow.
And I got sick. Then they finally said, boy, sometime, I guess we better approve it. They approved it. Okay, that was easy. But before
that's funny.
Before of the presbytery. And well, the question they asked of me was, what would you like to do for continuing education? And I was serving a church as a state of supply, unordained at that point. And I said, I work with a lot of older women in the church also, and I'd like to learn how better to work with older women as a young pastor. My dad started to laugh. He was up me up. He just started laughing because he didn't believe he couldn't work with him. That's a whole other thing. Now I thought, thanks, Dad. Now I'm going to fail. But they asked me on. But afterwards, we went to supper, and there was a lady in front of us, and she turned to me and said, "Oh man, you were in big trouble." I'm part of the new Presbyterian women group that we have organized, and that was horrible what we set up there and what happened up there. And I said, but it was my father. She didn't listen. 5 years later, we were grading ordination exams, and she came up to me and she says, I want to apologize. I was hoping I'd run into something. That I was so on fire for what I believed in. That
Wow.
But I thought I was dumb. My father laughed. I thought, they're gonna say, forgive this guy.
And part of the reason that we go through such a lengthy process, one, we want to make sure that there's a sound basis for theological understanding. Yeah. Even if it's not the theology we own, we can talk with people about colonialism, post-colonial liberation theology, we can talk about Black theology, we can talk about these things, even if they don't sit with us, so we have a basis. For us in the Methodist Church, we are guaranteed an appointment for life once we are born for faith. They have to pay me or give me a job for the rest of my life, which is great. I had basically 10. So I always told so literally it was right after Thursday session. I'm sitting there and I'm in my office and I just do this. I was like, well, this is what I was recommended online. Like, what? I don't have to do everything. I got 10 now. So anyway, that's the process. It's a long process. There's a lot of heartache in it. If you move conferences, which we did, the Mountain Sky Conference, I call it the land of the misfit toys. We really are, because we are a conference that so is in desperate need of clergy. Most of you are from Wyoming, correct?
We are all residents of Wyoming, even if we came from somewhere else.
But I mean, we have, right now, I think we have 4 churches open in Wyoming.
Only 4?
At least.
Only 4?
I think there's more than that. Wait, no, there's 22. I'm sorry. I think there's something like that. I don't know. I don't remember the number.
We have 6.
So, but the reason is people that have been basically abused or mistreated or thrown out of process in other conferences. I was one. I don't know if that's what happened to you. I'm not filling in your story for you, but
A little.
yeah.
They had plenty. Matter of fact, you know, you had to stay at DCOM until they were ready for you to come up. So it was very hard. That's why I said I rewrote. When I turned in my paperwork here, I'd already fully written it twice before, so this was the 3rd time. So it was good.
So let's let Cory turn to current events in the United Methodist Church. And if you've been around or in any denomination, you can fill in the blanks.
So the current state of the United Methodist Church is one of disarray. You can help me with I don't know it all. I'm not an expert at all of this. We are basically at the point right now of schism. The United Methodist Church is trying to remove hurtful language from the book of discipline that limits LGBTI plus people from clergy, from ordination. One of the big powder kegs in all of this is our current bishop in the Mountain Sky Conference, Bishop Oliveto. She, as I said, is the first openly gay bishop in the United Methodist Church. Say that because we know there were gay bishops, they just never came up. So what we found from this is because of her, there was a group called the WCA. There was the Wesleyan Covenant Association and the Global Methodist Church. These are the 2 big places that the conservative Methodists are in. We are sitting at a point now where we had, I forget how many annual conference this year that disaffiliated, 28, 22? No, I wasn't there.
Was that just in the Mountain Sky region?
This is just the Mountain Sky.
They removed the church.
So, yes.
The church left the conference.
Yeah, so the church just said, we're done, we're leaving. We took a vote, the vote had to be 2/3 majority for that church the same year. Now, these are mostly smaller churches, churches of normally less than 20 members. We found this is what it is. Some, mostly it's on the matter of sexuality. Now,
38.
38, okay, so we had 38 disaffiliate in this conference. I forget how many were in
That's over first day.
four in one church, because we have one church in Santa.
What they gonna do and then what you define as a ministry?
That's the question that I asked. So when
So
go ahead.
your findings is most of the churches that pulled themselves out of the Mountain Sky Conference and the United Methodist are small churches, small churches of less than 20 or so people.
Not all of them. But
Not
most of
all,
them.
but the majority.
I'd say
Okay.
most of them, wouldn't you? So the average age of a Methodist is about 60.
So to say the church is senior is kind of a miss.
I mean, But I think
Missing the
that's
point.
almost any church.
It is.
Yeah.
We all are.
Except for like this.
Yeah. That's a, yeah.
Oh, look, we have one right here, we have one down the road, we have several in town, but the mega churches find diminishing return because it's not worship. Anyway. I'm way off track.
Back to the United Methodist.
So what we
Called
find,
pseudo Baptist.
It's interchangeable.
it is, it's not worship, it's performance. And
You go to church, because
yeah, yeah.
Let's go back to the United
Yeah,
Methodist
no,
and their situation right now.
So,
Only because, not because we're hitting on the United Methodist friends, but because we all need to learn how to communicate and understand each other.
so what we found is we had 38 disaffiliated. This meant that they no longer are attached to the annual conference. It means they're no longer paying money into the annual conference. We have to pay our apportionments, probably the same as the other denominations that don't.
Or at least similar.
Presbytery or the synods, or, so they're pulling out, what we're finding is that it's mostly over the question of sexuality. Not all, but a lot. There are some that are frustrated with, we were talking about this earlier, the ability of the conference to support a church. The question that keeps getting asked is, well, what has the church done for us? The main thing a church, or the conference does for a church is give the pastor. Smaller churches can afford us. We have minimums to meet, even as, non-elder clergy, you have minimums to meet. And we're working half or quarter time in some churches and some can't. So they're leaving and they're finding themselves going, okay, we're done. What we found is well, why don't you tell them what happened at the last general conference? Because you were there, and you let me tell that story.
And what year was that?
2018
2018 at the last UMC General Conference.
was in Orton.
No, that's right, there was a
And then
special
the
session.
special session was in St. Louis.
Yeah, sorry.
So it's
So we had a
showing-
special session in 2018, so I'll let you go ahead and share that.
The special session,
Mhm.
so we were unable to decide at the previous one in 60 when I was there. And it was funny because
Decide on
what to do about gay.
gay bishops?
No, just
LGBTQ.
Oh,
And
in
there
general,
was-
in
and-
general. Okay.
In short, there is a panel of bishops and they're taking turns presiding. And then from the floor, there's the back and forth and Robert rules. Literally, the floor said, we can't figure this out. We want you to do it. The bishop should get together and go, it's not our job to figure out. You must do it. And we left not knowing, what was going to happen. And 2 years later, a special session just back in the so they all get back together again. Almost 1,000 delegates on the floor, a bunch of people watching. And at that time, they said, no, we're not going to affirm LGBTQ people as pastors or, and so it was disheartening. So those that were pro thought it was the end of the world. The WCA, they had their breakfasts in our hotel, so I ate free breakfast 2 mornings in a row and this presentation. Thank you very much. Rob Ray, folks.
Conservativeness.
Do what?
Did you take?
Thumbs to go with that. Oh, we did nice snark.
So when that one ended, it looked like the more conservative arm was going to keep the church and the progressives were going to have to leave. And then over the course of the next year or so, it flipped.
Huh.
So what happened was, at this point, there were accusations brought up about bribing. So the United Methodist Church not only serves in the United States, have missional churches. Our largest population is in Africa, in the Philippines. We have missional churches in Europe and basically on every continent. of the world. I just visited, not the United Methodist Church, but the Methodist Church in Rome, which is kind of cool, when I was there last month. But, so what they did is the WCA, or the Wesley Covenant Association, started bribing the delegates from the African churches. Oh, here, have this on. Here, oh, it's cold and sick.
And which group was doing that?
The WCA.
The traditionalist.
The conservatives.
The people who were like God.
So they got the votes.
Your snark is showing.
Yeah. So they got the votes at this point. They got a lot of, and a lot of steam. And then basically, we were supposed to meet in 2020 and COVID hit. I think it was in 2019, we had the Christmas agreement. The Christmas agreement was an agreement that the Methodist Church made to the Wesley Covenant Association, saying we will pay you $25 million to get the hell out.
Oh,
And they said, okay, because they're getting the free $25 million. COVID hit.
wow.
And the WCA, the Wesley Covenant Association, was blindsided by the group that you've probably heard of, the Global Methodist Church, the GMC. Their leadership came from the WCA, and they were completely blindsided that they came into existence. They said, hey, we're here, we're going to be the new face of the conservative Methodist Church.
Whereas the WCA thought they were.
Yeah, and they just said, what? Which basically negated the Christmas agreement that they made with the Methodist Church.
So what is the difference? Oh, you're probably getting to it, but what is the difference between these two groups? This is why, this is like herding cats, and you probably understand when I say that. We all, but wait, what about this? What about that? What about this? What? Back to you.
I don't know much other than my conservative attitudes about either group. And I choose not to because I am a United Methodist. I'm going to stay a United.
And you don't need to focus on that too much.
I
Yeah.
don't, but basically, they lost a lot of power about a year ago. I think it was about a year ago. The entire, all the bishops of the African continent wrote a letter saying that they will back the United Methodist Church instead of the Global Methodist Church.
Really?
This was a letter that came out in its true to form, because they realized that they were doing some very nefarious things towards the delegates. They felt that this was wrong, and they wrote a letter stating, we stand with the United Methodist Church, which basically took all that power, as he said, and flipped it. The United Methodist Church has the authority and the power still to have the votes to remain themselves, and the Global Methodist Church is going to go with its tail between its legs, about $25 million that we promised the base.
And the WCA is not getting it either.
No, neither is. Now, the biggest problem with all of this is in the Methodist Church, we have something called the trust clause. I don't know if this is in your denominations. Isn't it? Okay. So the trust clause basically means this church owns this property until it sells, then it reverts to the conference and it's their money. So if this church were to say, we're done, we're leaving,
They don't get to keep the
they
building.
don't get to keep the building, or they have to pay it out. Every conference is different. Ours is a lot different. I think the deal that our conference made, and I don't know if you've heard it, do you know the deal?
I don't know how they came out with the month number, but before our vote, everyone that was brought up for the vote had reached and paid all the financial debt.
Right, so you have to pay any back apportionments if you've not paid 100% of your apportionment. And they never stipulated the year limit. I don't know if it's been the last 20, the last 30, or the entire life of that church, which if it's that, that's a lot of money. So they have to pay all back apportionments to the church.
Meaning the UNC nationally,
No.
No?
Conference, to the conference.
to the conference. Okay.
Because that's where the
The
global,
most-
or the United Methodist Church gets their monies from the conferences.
Okay.
That's the funnels upward that way. So they have to pay that. They have to pay get the number. They have to pay a minimum of the clergy retirement. I think it's like 170,000 or something. It's a lot of, I think it's on a scale. And then depending on the church, some of them have to buy the fund. It depends on the agreement that the conference made with them. Because again, if this church wanted to leave, and I've used this example in this church, they'd have to pay for this church, have to pay for the parsonage I live in, they have to pay out any back apportionments, and they get the clergy retirement. For this church, it would be well over $2 million.
And keep the building.
And keep the building. Now, again, as I always tell people, I have people in the church who are like, well, we want to leave. I said, you as a person, you're free to leave the Methodist church at any time. But as soon as you do, I don't care what you do. I mean, I'm not trying to.
And you are not allowed to take the building and the whole
Well,
group
I mean,
of people
I'm
with
just
you.
talking membership. Somebody's like, I
Yeah.
want to pull my membership. Great.
Okay.
It means you get no. Church?
What's it take to be a member?
Oh, it depends. For you? So, there are two ways, confirmation for young adults and for children. Confirmation happens right in junior high age. You go through the entire process of confirmation, become a member at that point. We all have it, same catechisms, a little different.
Yeah.
But for adults, what it takes is mainline Protestants or Catholic denominations. If you were a member and you call or you say to me, I want to transfer. I call up the other church and say, they want to transfer. Great, you're members. Membership doesn't mean as much as it used to. It's still important, don't get me wrong. But that used to be how we based our income to the conference, as active members in the church. We've moved that to the gross out of the offertory each week instead of what membership is. So membership to me really doesn't, in that regard. If you want to be a member and you profess that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, you're in. I prefer, if you haven't been baptized, I would baptize. But again, the Methodist Church only believes in one baptism. If you believe if you were baptized as an infant, you will not be baptized again, because it's not like it's denominational. It's you're in the family of God. Also, be one baptized. Yeah.
Well, now we're getting to
Your baptism.
a personal thing.
I can do this. I can do this. So I
Okay.
became a Methodist in terms of 40 minutes.
I
When I moved to Michigan.
shouldn't cackle like that, should I?
The closest Presbyterian church was 40 minutes from us, and the closest Methodist church was 2.
There you go.
So I became a Methodist. My mom was raised United Methodist. My grandparents were. So it wasn't that big. Yeah, so that's why. So it was that, and I actually. Yeah, I mean, the theology is depending on the profession. Yeah, I mean, it's which is your PCA or PCA? PCA says the more liberal, the PCA is just like they're out there. So, but we're basically simpatico. Same with the Episcopalian Church, the Lutheran Church, a lot of us. Huh? The ELCA. Yeah. Well, Missouri Synod and Wisconsin Synod do have issues there. They don't like us. We don't like them. That's
So Cory,
So, yeah.
when Bishop Oliveto
Mhm,
became bishop,
mhm.
did you have a big brouhaha in this church?
I was not in this church. I was up north. I served in Montana.
Okay,
Yes. So
which is still the Mountain Sky region,
Yes,
so
it's still-
maybe if you'd rather talk about that church, that'd be okay. How did that process
so
occur? How could we do it? Because this is an issue that's going to be cropping up if it hasn't already.
So the issue that we have in our conference is we have, I don't want to say very liberal, but we have a very liberal standing of clergy administration. We are more liberal standing than we are conservative. But most of our churches are only conservative and extremely conservative areas. Cheyenne, maybe not so much. I mean, it is. Pine Bluff.
Yeah,
That's not-
different.
Here, we are in the middle of coal, oil, and gas. Let me tell you how they feel about Trump. I don't have to for this. It's Wyoming, we're a Republican state. So there's a lot of butting of heads at this point. As you mentioned earlier, a lot of churches said, well, we want to leave the conference. I had my churches say that, and I said, all right. I told them the stipulations, and they said, well, what about you? I said, I'm leaving. Well, what do you mean? I said, I'm United Methodist pastor. I'm not leaving the conference. I'm not leaving the denomination. And they said, well, what are we going to do to find a pastor? I said, good luck. Because I don't know about you, but if you weren't appointed to Pines Bluff, you wouldn't be going there. You know, and that's part of the joy of the itinerancy is we are put in places where we can do our work. It's not like the Presbyterian where we find it, or the Episcopal Church is a call system.
I'm Baptist, so
Baptist,
you're on your own.
Baptist, you're basically your own authority all the time.
Mhm.
So we, but I basically told them, I said, you are welcome to leave. They were upset. They said, the biggest thing that we'll hear about our bishop is that she wasn't rightfully and lawfully ordained as a bishop. Because she became an elder in the 1982 book of discipline. And at that point, it had nothing to say about LGBTI people being ordained clergy. He was ordained as a full elder. And to become a bishop in the Methodist Church, all you need to be is a full elder. I can be nominated to be bishop. No way. I have a friend who actually goes to General Conference and there's a jurisdictional. Anyway, they're the ones who appoint bishops. And she's like, I can put your name in there. So if you do, I will tell you. Straight and well. Very, there's a lot of power grabs in that position still. There is, and I don't play politics.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no, I'm not going to play that. So, but she was an elder in full connection in good standing. She followed everything. So basically, think of the Book of Discipline as when you went to college, your college catalog here. That's what you followed under your rules for ordination. Pardon me? Yeah. Yeah. So this, this is basically the next closest thing we have to the Bible.
So do they say then the rules changed? And so Oliveto got in under the old rules, not the current rules?
So she was created as an elder, and an elder in good standing, regardless of sexuality. The
Yeah.
rules did change, and I forget when they changed them. At least this is my recollection. By that time, she was already ordained. There wasn't the questions.
Mm-hmm.
There for about 10 to 15 years, they asked questions in ordination. Are you homosexual? Are you gay? Are you lesbian? Are you homosexual? Because that was part of our discipline. Last year, the Florida Annual Conference, the entire state of Florida, an entire class was dismissed from ordination because there were two that were professing homosexual. They decided instead of questioning any of them, they just canceled them. And basically everyone went about the conference because rightfully so, they're not going to get ordained there, so they left. It's a big mess. I mean, we hear this all the time. We get the stress, we get the question. I was down in Florida. My mom was down in Tampa, and every time I go down there, she has me preach, which is great. I just pull an old sermon out.